I am much more intentional about everyone in my life and everything in my life. And that is in part because of, being diagnosed with cancer. And even though I haven't started treatment yet, but just knowing that in some ways, I feel like I have a bit of a ticking clock. And it's, if that's the case, if I embrace that notion, then it leads me to make sure that I do everything that I can to enjoy and appreciate every single moment. And in doing so, letting the people that are with me in those moments know that I'm thoroughly glad and excited that they're with
Have
me
you
as
ever
well.
thought, what if this is all just a dream? Have you ever thought?
My name is TT Stern-Enzi. I'm the artistic director of the Over the Rhine International Film Festival, and I was one of the recipients of a 2024 ArtsWave Black and Brown Artist Grant. In terms of the genre that I operate in, I'm primarily, I guess, known as a writer and film critic. I like to expand that to more of a cultural critic as well. So that gives me the opportunity to not just focus on film, but also kind of dabble into other cultural realms and artistic and creative aspects as well. When I'm at my best as a film critic, I believe um, I operate in some ways as a hip hop producer. Uh, the best way to explain that is to think about the idea of hip hop production. You are taking samples from a variety of sources, reconfiguring them, slowing them down, speeding them up, putting them together to create a new flow, if you will. And in some ways, as a critic, that is the same thing that I do. I look at the film that is in front of me, whether it's a film or a TV show, whatever it is. I start with that and then have the opportunity to sort of soak it all in, see what it reminds me of, what references it will bring up for me, whether that be other films, other TV shows, uh, history, cultural events, music, science, what have you. And I find ways to sample whatever those elements are as I'm talking about that film or writing about that film. So by the end of sort of the perfect review, I may have anywhere from 4 to 8, let's say, um, cultural references that I have pulled samples from and incorporated into that piece of criticism that I've written. And hopefully, if I am operating at my best, it means that the reader will have the opportunity to understand what it was that moved me about that particular film. They can go see it, but then they'll have the opportunity to go back and think, well, wait a minute, there are all of these other pieces that were in there. Maybe I need to go dig in the crates and find what those references were, go check them out for myself, and then figure out how that I can then incorporate that additional information into my awareness and understanding of that particular film, again, TV show that was the, sort of the foundation for the piece in the first place. My pitch for the Truth and Innovation uh, ArtsWave grant that I received this year was the title of it is Stepping into Fatherhood. And my approach to it was to look at and think about the idea of fatherhood from a very unique and almost unicorn like position that I feel that I kind of operate in. I am the step parent of 2 kids who don't look like me, and wanted to explore the idea of being able to walk through the world with my kids, both as they were younger and now, and kind of evaluate how people see us as a family unit. In addition to that, though, I also wanted to explore the notion of fatherhood in a much broader health-based situation, because I only met my birth father one time. I was in my 40s. It was literally about a year before he died, and he had prostate cancer. And as a matter of fact, he, his 2 brothers, and my grandfather all had prostate cancer. It did not actually kill my father, but he died from complications of other cancers that he had at the time. So I spent my late 30s up through my early 50s getting tested so that I could understand and have an awareness of the real reality of sort of an inevitable sense of knowing that I was probably going to get cancer. And when I met him, uh, the idea behind meeting him was really more the idea that I wanted to put a face to this thing that was going on in my body. At the time, I was training for marathons. I was watching what I was eating. I was in great shape. But this is something that I knew that was going to happen no matter how well I took care of myself. So I needed to have a better understanding, or at least, like I said, a face that I could kind of put that on. So I met him with that intention, and in meeting him and sort of going through that process and kind of building that awareness for myself, my kids also had a similar kind of situation because they have found ways that they had to deal with the idea of their father in much the same way. They have mental health issues that they have picked up from him and his father as well. So we shared this kind of connection of knowing that there were things that were affecting who we were as people that were not necessarily based on our lived experience. So I enjoyed, if you can imagine that, the idea of kind of sharing that journey with my kids and us kind of talking through what that meant for each of us as we were trying to define who we were as people and who we were as a family. My final project has 5 long form essays, and as part of those essays, some are really almost nonfiction narratives, novels, if you will, that kind of looked at and explored my questions of fatherhood and the journey that I went on to meet my father. um, I wouldn't have been able to do this as a film critic without also including film in there as well. So I was able to go to the Sundance Film Festival earlier this year and see films that specifically focused on the relationships of fathers, and not just fathers and sons, but just fathers in general. The good, the bad, and the somewhat indifferent, if you will, in terms of how those fathers dealt with their families, their children, and their own roles as parents as well. My final essay was one that involved sitting down and interviewing both my kids and my two brothers, which gave me the chance to have very intimate conversations with them, not just about fatherhood and potentially my role in their lives, but just fatherhood in a broader sense. My kids, my son and my daughter, talked about, yes, my relationship with them, but they also talked about their relationship with their own father and the differences between the two of us and how we've all been able to move forward together. In the case of my brothers, we all had very different relationships with our father. My father, my pops, as I used to call him, was my step parent. He came into my life when I was 20. In essence, I didn't really need a father at all. My youngest brother is adopted, and pops was in his life, his entire life. So there's this interesting range in terms of how we all connected with him and our relationships with him. And somewhere in there, I think in all of those interviews and the conversations that came out of it, there is a sense of a particular truth that we all kind of expressed about what fatherhood meant to us, what ideas of masculinity meant to us, and in some ways, the idea of love and the notion that we don't always share and express our pride in the people around us. So for me, that kind of summed up a lot of what I thought or didn't even know that I was thinking about when I pitched this project in the first place. I also feel like that's part of the innovation as well, because I was able to create a situation and a dynamic where we could have those conversations in a very interesting and unique kind of way. And over the course of the 5 essays, I use very different styles in terms of writing and the approach to each one. You could argue that the second one, based on the films I saw at Sundance, was more of a review of films with, again, some of these elements put into place. Some of the other essays are, again, much more straightforward, like I said, almost nonfiction novel chapters. So I wanted to kind of play around and explore with how you tell your stories and how they become more meaningful as you tell them in different ways. Pride is something that I feel that we need to be very intentional about. My middle brother mentioned the fact that when during his interview that he asked our father if he was proud of him, and I was amazed and kind of surprised by the idea of doing that. I had never thought to ask Pops if he was proud of me. I kind of just assumed and knew that he was. But I love the fact that my brother asked that, and he did it because he's a parent now as well, and he wants to make sure that his kids don't have to question or wonder if he's proud of them. And I've taken that to heart. As a matter of fact, getting ready for the presentations and the exhibitions for this latest round of the Black and Brown Artist Grants, I reached out to my kids at the very start of it and told them, even though I knew they wouldn't be able to be here and participate and to hear me and see me talking about this project, I wanted to let them know, A, that I love them, which I tell them all the time that I love them. But more importantly, I let them know how proud I was of them. And I'm not sure that I do that all of the time, but this project has made sure that that will be a much more intentional thing that I try to do moving forward with my kids and pretty much with everyone in my life. So I feel I've gotten a much greater reward out of doing this than just the idea of creating these essays. It is hopefully something that will uh, impact my life as I move forward as well. What is the one thing that I would want people to remember? I'm not sure that I can narrow it down to one thing, but again, I probably came closest to it in the last response about intentionality. I am much more intentional about everyone in my life and everything in my life, and that is in part because of being diagnosed with cancer, and even though I haven't started treatment yet, but just knowing that in some ways, I feel like I have a bit of a ticking clock. And it's, if that's the case, if I embrace that notion, then it leads me to make sure that I do everything that I can to enjoy and appreciate every single moment. And in doing so, letting the people that are with me in those moments know that I'm thoroughly glad and excited that they're with me as well.